Welcome to this explainer on Paolo Rossi. This is a story that proves the most fascinating journeys out there, they almost always start in total darkness. I'm incredibly excited to share this one with you because, honestly, it completely defies logic. We kind of have this habit of looking at sports legends as these untouchable figures, like they just walk this straight, perfectly paved road to glory. But the reality is usually so much messier than that. Okay, let's dive right in.
Look, football fans absolutely adore a flawless champion. Obviously, right? But there is just something undeniably magnetic about a player who has to claw their way back from rock bottom. Perfection is great to watch, but struggle? Struggle is human, and football is basically this massive stage where human drama plays out in real time. The sport loves a hero, for sure, but man, it loves a redemption arc even more.
So, that brings us to the big question for today's explainer. How exactly does one guy go from public disgrace straight to football immortality? We're looking at the absolutely wild true story of how one striker completely rewrote his legacy on the world's biggest stage back in 1982. Because as you'll see, this wasn't just about winning a trophy. It was about reclaiming his entire identity.
Act 1. The Fall from Grace. To really grasp the sheer size of the mountain he had to climb, we got to look at the valley where he started. Picture this. It's 1980, just 2 years before the World Cup, and Rossi gets banned from football. He was implicated in a major match-fixing scandal. This was a massive suspension that pretty much stripped away his entire future. All through 1981, he's just sitting there in the dark. No football, no spotlight, literally nothing to keep him sharp. And then, out of nowhere, in 1982, he gets selected for the Italian World Cup squad. The public was absolutely stunned.
Fans, critics, pretty much everyone with a microphone was questioning this enormous gamble. People were demanding, why him? Why now? The Italian media was absolutely ruthless about it. They wanted to know why on earth a disgraced player who hadn't touched a ball in top-flight competitive football in almost 2 years was suddenly representing Italy on the global stage. It honestly felt like a guaranteed disaster. And for a minute there, the critics looked perfectly right. 0. That's how many goals he scored in the entire group stage. Rossi looked terribly off the pace. He was completely out of rhythm, just physically and mentally lagging behind the speed of the game. Italy was struggling right alongside him, barely scraping by just to survive and advance. And the noise from the press, it grew into an absolute roar.
Act 2. The Turning Point.
For most people watching, his story was already a wrap. It was a miserable failure, a huge gamble that blew up in Italy's face. But then, Italy finds themselves in a must-win scenario against none other than the 1982 Brazilian Giants. And let me be clear, this wasn't just a good team. This squad is widely considered one of the greatest ever assembled anywhere. We're talking absolute legends: Zico, Socrates, Falcao. These guys weren't just players. They were literally known globally as the artists of the game. They played with this terrifying, joyful fluidity. Italy had to win to advance. Anything less, and they were packing their bags in total disgrace.
So they're up against this seemingly insurmountable wall of talent, right? And then a spark. One goal. Rossi, the very guy who had been stumbling around the pitch all tournament, suddenly shatters the doubts. He actually finds the back of the net.
But wait, it gets better. It wasn't just a lucky break. Then, another. He suddenly hits his stride, completely shocking the Brazilian defense with a second strike. You could almost feel the collective gasp of the footballing world. It was like watching 2 years of rust just fall off in real time. A hat trick. You can't write a better script. In this absolutely breathless explosion of talent, Paolo Rossi bags a hat trick against the best team on the planet. He essentially single-handedly knocked the Brazilian Giants out of the tournament. In just 90 minutes, he took an entire nation's doubt and flipped it into absolute unwavering belief.
Act 3. The Ultimate Triumph.
At this point, the momentum was just a runaway train. The whole world is suddenly tuned in to watch this miraculous comeback. He goes from being the squad's weakest link to literally the most dangerous man on the planet. He carries this insane, ferocious energy right into the semifinal against Poland. He doesn't just score, he scores twice. And it wasn't chaotic either. He was calm, he was clinical, he was completely unstoppable. That frantic energy from the Brazil match settled into this lethal, ice-cold confidence. Italy finally believed, and the world just watched in awe. Which brings us to the absolute summit of this climb, the World Cup final. They're up against a massive West Germany team. And Rossi, he delivers yet again. He scores the opening goal with his perfectly precise header, completely breaking the deadlock and setting the tone for the rest of the match. Italy rides that wave to secure a 3-1 victory, and they become world champions.
Let's just put this haul into perspective. He went from 0 goals, literally 0, in the group stage, to being the undisputed best player in the world. He racked up an incredible 6 goals, walked away with the Golden Boot as the top scorer, snagged the Golden Ball as the tournament's absolute best player, and oh yeah, became a world champion. Nobody had ever turned a tournament around like this. Literally no one.
His path back was not clean. Actually, scratch that. It was messy, filled with mistakes, long silences, and brutal public scrutiny. But it really hits the nail on the head regarding redemption. Redemption isn't about perfection, it's about response. It just goes to show that true greatness is defined by how you react in your darkest moments, you know? How you handle the crushing pressure when absolutely everyone is waiting for you to fail.
The whole arc of 1982 is basically a masterclass in resilience. Just look at the contrast. You go from scandal, silence, and 0 goals, all the way to being the savior, bathed in glory, holding the Golden Boot. Paolo Rossi didn't just win a shiny trophy that summer. He entirely reclaimed his good name. He took the pen and rewrote his own history through sheer, stubborn perseverance.
So, I'll leave you with this thought. Is this the greatest redemption arc in football history? When you really think about that insane turnaround from absolute 0 to global hero, stepping out of the shadows of a massive band to lift the World Cup, it's hard to top. I really want to hear your thoughts on this, so definitely let me know in the comments if you can think of a greater sports comeback. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.